but it's the ability to bring those voters with you.
It's complicated and you don't need to worry about it.
It's been very well canvassed that as a party, we don't think the way that Darlene acted was in line with our values and principles.
I really had to think about, how am I going to change things up? How am I going to get through this? Because I don't want to fail.
It is foul and personal and violent.
Job is to make sure that we are showing New Zealanders that there is an alternative to the divisive approach of this government, that you can bring people together.
I mean, I think one of the things that any government of whatever stripe has to realise that every minister has to be a climate minister now.
When you've got a country that's got a young population but they don't get involved, you might want to have a grown-up chat about that.
We don't want a situation where government dictates the local government, but you want to make sure the system is set up so that it's easy for communities to make a decision.
I'd be really interested to see if the officials that advise that a Crown Observer was necessary or should be put in place, or whether he's made that judgment call himself.
I don't think we did, and I've said this, I don't think, because it happened quite quickly last time, I don't know that we did a good enough job of bringing the public with us.
Remember, just by having Maori Wolves doesn't guarantee that mana whenua are going to be represented around the table.
Suggests that whānau with a disability and those who care and support them are somehow grifters.
Hello there, kia ora.
Hello there. Big day today. Nomination.
Massive day. Crazy day. Yeah, and my phone hasn't stopped buzzing since. I've had to recharge it twice with all of the strange things that have come through because of the local body elections. There'll be some updates a little bit later about that. There is actually a section in this week's news, this week's the news, around some of the names that are running, which I think people will enjoy. But yeah, it's been crazy when it comes to local body elections. We have 3 former MPs running in Kirikiriroa Hamilton. We've got Nobby Clark's brother running for the Mayor of Invercargill, even though he lives in Tasman. We've got some places like Southland and Gore where the numbers being what they are for the people running, they're guaranteed to get some conspiracy peddling candidates onto their councils. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, my highlight of today, because you were just telling me as we come on here, looks like no Keith Bennett forever.
Yeah. Looks like it. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed because there's still a couple of days for all the nominations to be confirmed, for them to go through and double check everything. There's also, disappointingly, a few places where there are no actual elections. People have been elected unopposed, which, it's good that people are standing up for it, but it's always nice when you've got a battle there of ideas for people to get out and get behind. So I guess we just have to wait and see how that's going to roll out and put together all the election coverage and start worrying about that over the weekend.
Meanwhile, shall we see how our friends the nurses are getting on?
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I've got this really horrible tickly cough, so I think I need a nurse. So let's bring Anne in. It is a horrible cough, Anne. It won't go away. Any recommendation?
Yes, stop smoking.
Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah, 3 packs a day is too much, but St. Peter said it was fine.
Vitamin C, always a good go-to. Lemon and honey drinks. And
Yes.
put a mask on if you're going outside. Don't spread it around.
I've been avoiding going out anywhere just to make sure that doesn't happen. So I'm sitting here in my own little hot box of a flu virus, but I caught it on the plane on the way back a couple of weeks ago. So I'm over the worst of it, but the cough.
Oh, good. There is a thing called, the 6-week cough or the 90-day cough. It's a viral cough. Yeah, hopefully you haven't got it.
I don't want that. That sounds awful. Awful. Almost as bad as what you've been offered from the government.
Yes, well, we've been in negotiations for 27 months now, and every time we go back to the table, things that we thought had been agreed on at the last meeting have been withdrawn. It has got to the point where it is absolutely ridiculous, and our negotiation team, who have done an incredible job, literally pulling their hair out. And it's been a very demeaning and denigrating process, really. Very, very reflective of the fact that I believe that Te Whatu Ora and this government in particular love discriminating against women. They want to put women back in their place, barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, if there is such a thing for some people. As we know, a lot of people are on the streets or living in their cars under this government. So even our student nurses are living in cars because they can't find accommodation, or when they go to placements, they can't afford to pay for accommodation. I've never in my 45 years of nursing known things to be so bad. So yeah, we went on strike on Wednesday, Thursday, and it was incredible.
The numbers I saw are about 40,000 nurses striking around the country. Is that accurate?
It's about 36,000, give or take. Yeah, that's how many. Yeah, fair enough. But unfortunately, that would absolutely play into the government in Te Whatu Ora's hands to say we have over-recruited nurses, which we also know is a nonsense.
Yeah. I mean, there's the hiring freeze is the one that gets me. Yeah, they claim there's no hiring freeze, but there's quite clearly no fresh hires beyond the bare minimums. How is that impacting care on the front line?
Well, first of all, we probably need to let your participants know that the hiring freeze, they say they're recruiting, and they are. Technically, they are. But, in one area who might need 10 nurses, they're only hiring one. So, technically they are recruiting, but not really to the matching the need for the patients and the keeping our nurses safe on the floor. So it's pretty bad, really. We know what safe staffing looks like. We have a tool called Care Capacity Demand Management that the government and the DHBs way back when agreed to fully implement through our public health hospital system by 2021. And to date, it still hasn't happened. Yeah.
They're running a little behind.
What's that?
They're running a little behind.
They are running a little bit behind. There was a great fuss back in 2019, I think, where the CEO of the New Zealand Nurses Organisation and the Minister of Health at the time, plus the Director General, all went on TV and shook hands and looked very happy and said, we've got a memorandum of understanding. It's going to ensure that this happens. But we all know what bits of paper, where they go. They either get shoved in a desk or filed in a rubbish bin. And it was never enacted. And you have to actually ask a question. Why is it that successive governments have chosen not to put enough nurses into the public health system, both in hospitals and in primary health care, to actually ensure the health and well-being of the people? They keep saying that's important. They legislated it in our Hauora Act, but the actual occurrence, the need has never been met. And now, right now, under this government, it's the worst I've seen in my 45 years of nursing.
There was some paperwork that was released late last night from, I think it's Brooke Van Velden's office, the cabinet discussions around pay parity. And I'm not sure if you've had a chance to see this because they deliberately snuck it out. So it was one of those things that gets buried on a Friday. In it, she argued that they needed to cancel pay parity because employers' rights were more important than human rights for workers, which is clearly a really upstanding, altruistic way to look at the world. I'm kind of wondering, from your perspective and what you're seeing, are nurses feeling like they're not being treated like humans, like their human rights aren't being met by the current government?
I think workers' rights in general throughout New Zealand are being absolutely trampled on, and those who are most disadvantaged, the ones that are on the minimum wage rather than the living wage, are absolutely being done to. And this government is in total breach of so many international regulations. It's just crazy, but they just ignore it. I mean, it's just incredible. So pay equity as a legislation, the intent was to ensure that women in this country were paid equally for the same job. Now, I'm a little bit sad that we had legislation to do that, because the focus has been on pay. The fact is that women are still not equals in this country, and there are so many aspects to our lives, either at work or at home, that are still not equal. We are very much second-class citizens, and this government and the main employer, Te Whatu are still treating us like we actually need to do what we told and be grateful. Well, that's just not how it works. We are just as we've got just as much right to be treated equally in every aspect of our lives as a man does. So yeah, I don't understand that. In terms of the employers, one could argue, if you wanted to, that they're trying to actually get the economy going, but that's not working, because if you actually put, what was it, 26,000 out of jobs in the industrial sector, and people are not paying taxes because of that. They're not buying stuff, so the economy is not stimulated. So everything is going down the tubes, and it's the same for nurses. Nurses are absolutely being done to twice over. One, because we're not being paid properly, but two, because we're not actually being allowed to go to work and work in a safe work environment. And as a consequence of that, I know for a fact that 19,600 nurses registered in New Zealand in the last year have registered to go and work in Australia. And 90%, just yesterday, 90% of nurses or student nurses who are about to graduate at the end of the year were asked the question, where are you going to work? And 90% of them said, we're going to Australia. And why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'd be very interested to see how many women we're losing out of this country. It's soon going to be very much a male-dominated society, because women are fleeing the country. And what does that say about the intelligence of us and the men in this country? Sorry, Paul.
No, it's fine. I have been called many things, and most of them are accurate, and that is certainly on the mark. I'll hand it over to Blake.
You talk about the nurses leaving to Australia. So Simeon Brown's been touting we're comparable to New South Wales.
Yes.
Get around the table, we're comparative over and over and over. How does that stand up with you?
Well, it doesn't stand up to me, but I'm not an economist, and I'm a great fan of Craig Rennie, who is an economist and does sterling analysis of these things. And just in the last week, he absolutely pulled that apart. So for those who don't know, the New South Wales in Australia is the state with the lowest paid nurses in Australia, and they've been striking on and off for the last year for a 15% pay rise. So, you know, we are not competitive with New South Wales. If we looked at Queensland, which is the best paid, we are way behind, and it's just not okay. That in some states in Australia, they do value their nurses and treat them well. And we need to be competitive in New Zealand to keep our nurses here and give them a real choice. So it's disingenuous that Te Whare and the government are using New South Wales as a comparator, because they know that they are the worst paid nurses in all the states of Australia. And so it's just not okay. And I know that another thing that they keep saying is that our average pay is 125,000. Well, that's completely untrue as well. Once again, Craig Rennie did a sterling analysis about this with Big Hairy News, and which I've posted on my Facebook page, because I just thought it was so good. And he pointed out that Te Whare's own data in the analysis that they've done about nurses' pay on their website demonstrates there's no way that an average nurse's pay is 125,000. So, you know, it's just ridiculous. And it's sad, because why would you want nurses to flee the country? Particularly nurses who've grown up in New Zealand, who understand the New Zealand culture, and hopefully understand the need to provide culturally safe care in our hospitals and our communities. Why would you want them to leave? They are the ones that understand the people that they look after. So, and instead, we have got 45% of our nurses currently working in New Zealand are from India, the Philippines, and England, Ireland, and Scotland. It's just crazy. Just crazy.
You talk about the 125,000, and people are saying, especially after your interview on Herald Now this week with Brian Bridge, people are saying, you should be grateful because most of our sectors only get a 60 to 100,000. That's 125. That's a whole lot more than most people earn. That must be quite, saddening to hear when that's their target for a lot of, white males and right-wing people and, etc.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I have noticed with people who make comments like that is that they have deliberately chosen to be reactive and not proactive, and not take responsibility for actually finding out what the facts are. You can't compare somebody who's, I suppose, working on the roads and turning the stop-go signs to a master's degree nurse specialist, or somebody like me who has done many, many years in the emergency department and has maintained my expert level of care. And I've got a master's with honours and a bachelor's degree and postgraduate diplomas in leadership and quality and risk, and I could go on. There has to be a little bit more to sort of being reactive to these kind of things. I've done 45 years of nursing. I've saved countless lives in my time. What is the value of somebody who is able to do that, and why is that value diminished just because we're female?
Yeah, and it's quite disheartening when you got commentators like Ryan Bridge and others saying, "Where's the data? Where's the data? Where's the data?" And then you have to stand up to these people. May I say, you did a stellar job standing up to them, but you shouldn't have to do that.
Well, Ryan Bridges, he's got a job to do. And I suppose in the media, and Paul, you probably, and Black, you can talk to this better than I can. You might have a way of doing that. And, Ryan has taken on this very provocative, I'm going to actually poke the tiger and see what comes out. But sometimes it can come across in a way that New Zealanders don't particularly like. And I've had commentary about that interview, that he was trying to say that I was a liar. or either Te Whatu Ora was a liar or the government was a liar. And he was trying to get a response. And, you know, if I'm being generous, I could say, well, you know, he's doing his job. But it was my job to actually counter that with the facts. And he kept saying, well, Te Whatu Ora could be lying. But I used their own data to actually prove that we have got unsafe staffing. 50% of all shifts throughout the whole of the public health system in the hospitals are understaffed every single day. And we know that because of the care capacity demand management tool that is utilised in some areas, not all areas as it should be. So we know this. We also know this because patient harm is going through the roof. You know, for instance, and Blake, you might be able to speak to this because I know that you don't get to move around a lot, but you have to deliberately move to prevent pressure area sores. Well, in hospitals, they are going through the roof because nurses can't do everything. There aren't enough of us to provide good care.
Yeah, and I make sure I get out of the bed and into my power chair at least 3 or 4 days a week.
But just imagine if you needed help to do that all the time and you didn't have anybody to help you. You know, it's the nurse's job to prevent harm and the doctors. But if we're not there, we can't do that and harm occurs. And that costs the country a huge amount. In the last year alone, reported patient harm has cost this country $1.2 billion. And the numbers of complaints that are going through to ACC because of patient harm is going through the roof.
Yes, indeed. We talk to Gary about this, Gary Panda about this all the time. Are you seeing a decrease in, you know, harm or even fatality because of some of these reductions in nurses and, you know, kind of thing? Or is it not really affecting the nursing side?
Well, it's a good question, Blake. The fact is that Te Whatu Ora has reduced the number of people in quality and risk who are supposed to report on patient harm by 30%. And they have stated recently in the media that they can't produce the annual reports to show how much harm has been done. Now, if you were a conspiracy theorist, you would say, well, this is a good excuse for them not to produce a report and show how bad it is. So we're in limbo land. We don't know how bad it has been in the last year. So, yeah, I'm really, really concerned. As a nurse myself, when I go to work in the emergency department and I'm answering a text that says, we're desperate, we'll take on any hours, I know I'm walking into a situation where the corridors are going to be lined with patients, the waiting room is going to be full, that people who have been waiting in ED for a bed in the hospitals have been waiting there for 1 to 2 days. And I know that we don't have enough people to keep eyes on them all the time to keep them safe. So I can just imagine that, you know, that is actually happening. And when I walk down the corridors, I deliberately put my eyes on people to see if there's something going wrong. Even though I haven't met them before, I can tell as an expert nurse that there's a problem. And I sometimes do see that there's something going down that hasn't been seen and catch it, simply because of my experience, skill and knowledge. And, you know, we're hemorrhaging our senior experienced nurses too, because the negotiations that we've been through 2 years ago promised our senior nurses relativity in pay, and Te Whatu Ora still hasn't delivered. And so our knowledge and experienced nurses are leaving.
One thing I've noticed about, one more thing before I hand over to Paul. One thing I've noticed about what Gary said the last time we caught up with him was he's noticing more and more fatalities in the waiting room because people are waiting too long.
That's true. That is absolutely true. You know, 4 or 5 years ago, pre-COVID, you would never have seen in the news a headline that says patient in the waiting room collapses and dies. And now it's becoming common. And in the last year, I've been going around, Blake, to what we call the New Zealand Nurses Organisation regional conventions. And I have been talking about violence and abuse in emergency departments and hospitals around the country. And did you know that we are 5 times more likely to get belted than any other worker or type of worker in New Zealand? But I've also been talking about the fact that violence and abuse comes about because people they come to us for help and they can't get it when they need it because they have to wait because we prioritize the sickest over everybody else. And that upsets people. But worse, there's overt racism within our health system. And that means that some of my colleagues, unfortunately, make decisions based on the way they see the world. And that is really, really sad. And, you know, I think as health professionals, it's our responsibility to recognize our gaps in our knowledge and our understanding of the world and deliberately go out and educate ourselves. Because a lot of us say, well, we treat each other as the best we can, but that's not good enough, not anymore. We need to actually look at why we're making the decisions we do about which patient comes in and gets treated and what we're missing in the way we're seeing our world. And one of the examples I've been giving is about a woman a young mother who died in a waiting room in a tertiary hospital. And it came out when I researched it that Maori are more likely to die by about 30 or 40% in EDs around the country than any other ethnicity. And so, you know, that is clearly because we, as a group of health professionals, are not challenging ourselves about how we make decisions about who to care for first. And that really hurts.
Have you got anything more to add, Paul? Any comments that you've seen that have come up or anything?
Well, I've been posting the comments as they're coming up, and most of them are very supportive, which is really good to see. I've got one big question for you, though. How do we fix this? What can we as the public do to help make sure that nurses get treated the way they should be treated and remunerated the way that they should be remunerated and given the respect that they deserve?
Well, that is a really, really good question. What we do need is we need health to stop being a ping pong ball in politics. We absolutely need cross-party agreement that health needs to be taken outside of politics. We need to have long-term planning so that decisions that are made for the greater good of our population to maintain or increase our health and well-being, improve the social determinants of health, are not something that are used for political point making. That we are all in this together. And to that end, I have been, and my colleague Kiri Nuku, our kai whakahare in NZNO, been working with the various political parties that talk to us, and they are Labour, Greens and Te Pāti Māori, and talking about how we can make this happen. And the other thing is we're going through negotiations, so therefore we're striking. And our primary healthcare nurses have been striking as well. Our hospice nurses have been striking. Our community support workers have been striking. What we'd like to see is the public come up and stand beside us, because the power is in the people. And if this government can be shamed into doing the right thing, that would be good in the short term. to provide us with a cost of living pay rise and an agreement to start hiring the nurses that we need in our hospitals. But in the long term, we need legislation that is actually going to ensure that we have the nurses we need in primary health and aged care and hospice care, and that it is not used as a political ping pong ball to actually save money on the backs of our work, and also with the lives of our nation, the people in our nation. So yeah, I invite the entire public to come and stand beside us, because we're not going to stop fighting. We're going to keep standing up. We're going to keep fighting back until we win this, because this is not about us. This is about you guys. It's about every single person that we care for in this country. And we have to do it for the health and well-being and the safety of people who access healthcare.
Just finally, do you intend to go take Minister Brown's offer to go back around the table like he's been asking?
Well, Simeon Brown keeps telling us to go around the table, but there's no, or get back to the table. There's no point in getting back to the table unless he actually puts something on the table. You know, just imagine, Blake, if you're told to actually go and sit around the table for dinner, and there's no dinner on the table. What's the point of going and sitting at the table? None.
Oh dear.
Conversation with Simeon does not sound like something I want to sit around a table for.
The one time I met him, we got lectures. We got told that what we were not going to be talking about for 15 minutes of our half an hour.
Oh, wow.
I know. So, you know, here we were, Kerry and I, extremely well educated and able health professionals who are leaders in the country, and we got lectured. So, yeah, that was the one and only time we met. Yeah. The other time I nearly met Simeon. Sorry, Blake. Well, you might remember the protest at Dunedin Hospital where we were standing around asking him to come out and speak to us to get some assurance that the new hospital build was going to be built to spec. And I stood in front on the footpath in front of his car and wouldn't get out of his way. But I reminded him when we met him that was the first time we'd actually come across each other, literally. So
did he remember?
I was just going to say, did he tell you that it was Labour's fault?
Did he tell me?
It was Labour's fault when he elected you?
It's always Labour's fault. Always, about everything, according to Simeon. According to the Coalition Party. They're running out of time. There's less than 400 days to the next election. How long can they keep blaming Labour?
Yeah, 401.
401.
That's how many days are there. If there's 400 days until the next election, they'll be blaming Labour for 401.
Yeah.
I say, bring it on.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us as always, eh?
Thank you, Blake.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
Do you know when the next strike action is planned? Is there more strike action planned at the moment, or is it?
Yes, right now. Yeah, we're currently asking our members to vote on the next strike action, and we're mixing it up a bit. We're going to, they keep using this word disruption. Well, we're using it too. And so watch this space. We are actually going to continue to actually do action. It may not be striking on the streets, but we do ask the public to actually understand why we're doing it. It's for their sake and our sake, and the health and well-being of this whole nation. It's not about, the so-called huge greedy pay rises that this government keeps suggesting that we're wanting. It's about the health and well-being of our nation, really, and the safety of us being able to go to work and do our job properly. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you
Brilliant.
as always.
Yeah. You take care, guys, and thank you. I hope to speak with you soon when we've actually won this battle.
Thank
Looking
you very
forward to that.
much. Oops, everybody's gone now.
Yikes. Sorry about that. I literally just hit the wrong button on my mouse.
That's okay. I'll hold the fort.
Those days. Yeah, I blame the cough. It's all the cough. There's been some fantastic comments that have been coming through. Just really good to see so much support for the nurses. My grandmother was a nurse, and so I have a huge amount of respect for them. I know that as a nurse, she was always very careful about how she cared for people. She worked in the mental health sector. And as a grandmother, she was always very, very quick to point out that as a nurse, she had inside information on all of us and would use it if she needed to make sure we behaved. So, a lot of respect for nurses.
I just before everyone asks, because I know I get a couple of questions about this every now and then. I will continue to push for Simeon to come on one of these programs, whether it's my channel or the Story channel. But I don't know the chances.
If Simeon would like to come onto this channel, I would absolutely love to have him here. But I will not take a 15-minute lecture from a little troll doll telling me what I can and can't say.
Yeah.
Anyway, we should jump into our next guest, which I now have to reline up because I jumped out by accident.
Another thing, well, I'll talk about it while you do that. Another thing we did this week is we talked with Francisco Hernandez about vocational education, and it was a very interesting conversation. We hung out for quite a bit last night, which not all of it was put on here, but we had a good time. So enjoy.
We did. All right. Yeah, let's listen to Francisco. My favorite thing about this whole interview is that he actually changed his camera angle so that we could get another baby Yoda in the shot. So I'm always down for that. Francisco Hernandez, Green MP, spokesperson on education, tertiary education, that kind of stuff. I've got one question for you before we jump into this. I want you to check my pronunciation on something. Because I just spent 2.5 weeks over in the Philippines, and you're, of course, proudly Filipino. So I want to make sure I get this one right. If I remember correctly, it's Kamusta Kana? Kamusta Kana?
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you?
Yeah. Okay lang. Ikaw.
Yeah. Brilliant place. Absolutely brilliant.
Did you go to Jollibee?
Yes. Yeah, we actually had it delivered. I took my mother over for her 65th birthday because she's a big fan of sort of the old style architecture that's over there.
The Spanish colonial.
Yeah, so we did that, and then we went off to Panglao, and we checked out the man-made forest and Tajas and the chocolate hills and stuff like that.
Stunning. Great, yeah.
Absolutely stunning. And now that I've given all that free tourism to the Filipinos, is there any chance that I can get like a commission or something like that?
You have to hit up the embassy for that, mate.
Perfect.
The embassy, probably.
Okay, I'll put them a bill. It'll be fine. Hey, our tertiary education sector has a bit of a problem at the moment, and her name is Penny. She's very, very good at going, you know what, screw everybody else now that I've got what I want out of the system. Do you want to give us a bit of a rundown as to what we're actually looking at the moment in terms of what the tertiary education sector is facing?
Well, the sector is in crisis because the government is choosing to disestablish Te Pukenga, and it's doing to do it without a plan or without support. That's led to around 1,000 jobs going in this country. Around 1 in 10 have disappeared. And it's really sad because the vocational sector is really important in training, the future workers of our country and the more practical experience, hands-on thing. Without the vocational education sector, we wouldn't have, occupational therapists. We wouldn't have, for example, engineers, and we wouldn't have like some of the creative people that are really important to have like a full life. So this basically began since the government came in 27 November 2023. they basically instructed Te Pukenga at that point to start making cuts, and they brought in a bunch of overpaid consultants and paid them, probably millions of dollars a year to like basically tell the like individual polytechs that used to be independent but are now part of Te Pukenga to start making cuts if they wanted to be independent. Of course, people wanted to be independent because people don't have confidence in the minister's alternative version of what Te Pukenga would transform into, which is like this kind of weird amorphous structure, which is going to be anchored around open polytechnic. Um, and yeah, basically since then, there's just been cuts right across the country with some really quite baffling decisions that polytechs are making on the basis of just prioritizing short-term viability so that they look good on paper, so that the minister allows them to be independent. For example, you've got places like North Tech proposing closing their forestry course, and like Northland has like tons of forestry, so
Well,
it's really
forestry is our
baffling.
third largest sector for the economy, for GDP,
Yeah.
tied with the creative industries. So those are two
even
big GDP earners that they're targeting.
Exactly, and it's even bigger in Northland.
Hmm.
So it's really baffling that they're making these decisions. They're also proposing closures of like campuses, like the Tokoroa campus that's run by Toi Ohomai in Tokoroa, and the Taupo campus as well. So again, this would really gut regional New Zealand and deprive, particularly communities like Tokoroa, where the mill has just closed. The government closed that. Well, the government didn't close it. The business owners closed it, but the government basically went in. A bunch of ministers went up to Tokoroa, made a bunch of promises, wrote a bunch of checks they didn't cash, and now all of a sudden there's like huge unemployment there, and they might not even be able to like retrain to get the skills that they need. So yeah, I think a lot of these changes are like really concerning, and obviously we're very opposed to them.
Now, I've heard 1,000 staff members losing their jobs, 500 courses looking at being shut down.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how many courses have there been.
And was it 30 campuses around the country are looking at being shut down?
I think that's like proposed or closed already. Yeah, that's like in the plans. Yeah.
How does that, like, Tokoroa is a fantastic example of a very sort of insular part of a region. To get there is a little bit of a trek from most places, and they're very self-sufficient. And as you said, they relied a lot on that Kinleith mill. How do we see these sort of impacts rolling out in other parts of the country? What are the impacts that could be happening to these other communities?
Well, I think the sort of immediate impact is that there won't be opportunities to like learn or retrain using on-campus delivery. But I think the minister has kind of tried to brush aside some of those concerns by saying, "Oh, look, these people will be able to like go do distance learning, for example." But I mean, how are you going to do like a freaking construction course by distance? Like one of the main advantages of vocational education is how hands-on it is, how practical the skills you get, how industry connected it is. So if you're just shoving them to like an online degree mill with like hundreds of students around the country, that's not quality education. So it's really not an adequate replacement. So obviously the immediate impact will be on the learners and the staff that will lose the jobs. But the tertiary impact, if you pardon the pun, will be on the communities, because these polytechs aren't just the bricks and mortar that they represent. They're not just about the courses and the students that are there. But these polytechs are quite often the heart of communities. Like a lot of polytechs host night classes, for example. A lot of polytechs like have bookable venues. So when the polytech gets closed, it'll lead to a hollowing out of a lot of the communities that the polytechs do support and do rely on. That do rely on it. So it's going to be like really bad.
Are there specific communities that we're looking at in terms of size that are more likely to be impacted by this? Is this something that will hit those sort of small to medium density communities more than, say, the middle of a city?
Yeah, I think we need to be careful about making generalizations like that because obviously, in theory, the sort of city-based polytechnics will have sort of economies of scale. So in theory, they shouldn't be impacted as much. But for example, the Te Awaha campus in Wellington, which is like literally at the heart of the CBD, that's one of the like programs that are the campuses that are set to close, with the programs being transferred elsewhere, are just not offered altogether. So, while in general I do think you could still say that the impacts will disproportionately impact rural communities because a lot of them, the polytechs in those areas were already struggling with viability even prior to Tipu Kinga, just because of the economies of scale, and also because of the fact that this country just doesn't value tertiary or vocational education as much as it should. I mean, if you look over in Australia, they've got free TAFE. TAFE is what they call polytech, and because of the fact that they have free TAFE, the polytechs are a lot more viable because students just know that they can get it for free and they can study and get upskilled. Whereas in New Zealand, you have to take on like a student loan, and of course, it's interest free. That's fair enough to say. But for a lot of people, knowing that not only will being a student make you broke, because the student allowance and the student loans, course related cost you get is pitiful compared to like what working on a full-time wage would be. I think it's like 300 a week versus, I don't know, like 700 or 800 if you're on a minimum wage job. So that's like a big wage differential in the first place. And also second, if you're taking on debt to have to retrain or get the skills you need, that puts a lot of people off. And we do know that it some communities in New Zealand have a sort of are more allergic to the idea of debt. I've heard that Maori and Pacifica communities don't like to take on debt because there's associations with loan predation and stuff like that. And even though it is interest free, there's still like that psychological barrier. But making it free like TAFE would really solve a lot of the viability issues in the sector.
If you're around that interest-free stuff, it's interest-free if you stay in the country. We're seeing record numbers of people leave because it's just not viable for them to be here. I don't know if you've come across it. I don't know if there's any research out there that indicates just how much money is then going to be charged as interest on those people who are leaving the country to find better lives, in terms of how much of them have student loans and stuff like that. But I can't imagine that it's going to be a small number of people leaving who have student loans.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's kind of sad that because of this government's political choices, it's manufactured an exodus of some of the best and brightest among us. Like they've made the political decision to prioritize giving tax cuts to landlords and giving tax cuts to big tobacco, giving spending $12 billion on like defense, which apparently we're going to use against our largest trading partner for some reason.
That's why Keith Patel's in the country, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's really concerning. Like that they're setting up FBI outposts in Wellington. I mean, America has a long and storied tradition of interfering in the domestic politics of even their allies. I mean, just ask Gough Whitlam over in Australia, right? Like, but anyway, that's an aside. It's concerning that so many New Zealanders are going overseas. It's really concerning that a lot of them are going with a debt burden that they're having to pay interest on. And it's even more concerning that so many young people don't feel like there's a future here in New Zealand. And that's why like overseas migration is at record high.
It's interesting because what a lot of people don't realize is that tertiary education places, can sometimes help with some of the other jobs that are struggling in our economy right now, like nurses, doctors, and everything in between. So, do you fear if all these reductions and shutdowns happen that it will only exacerbate the issues that we are having with like nurses and doctors and other critical professions, for example, Francisco?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, right? Like, I think there's a definite risk that, and I don't want to use this term because it sounds really bleak, but there's a real risk that New Zealand enters like a death spiral, right? Where like the people are leaving, and because the people are leaving, that adds strains to the people who are still here. But then it gets worse for them, so that they leave, and then you sort of have this like really shitty cycle where New Zealand just totally spirals down the drain. And I think that's why the next election is really important, because we still have an opportunity to like stop all this because before it really gets cemented in.
Because you know, a percentage of our nurses, for example, do come out of tertiary education, and we've seen that over the past few days that they have again been striking and all sorts of things. You know, how do we mix the tertiary education portfolios into like helping to retain our health workers? Because again, a percentage do come out of, not all, but a percentage do come out of tertiary education.
Yeah, I think that's a really insightful question, and you've hit the nail on the head there, because one of the problems with the tertiary education sector, well, and also the general education sector, if we're being honest, but one of the specific problems with the tertiary education sector is that it's sort of divorced from what the rest of the workforce is doing. There's a lack of alignment between future workforce planning and what we're training, and also what the needs of, for example, what the carbon-free industries of the future might be. So what the Greens have proposed is setting up a future workforce agency, and the future workforce agency will work, with tertiary providers, and it'll sort of help coordinate that talent pipeline a little bit better, so that we're not just doing things at random, like so that we're actually training enough New Zealanders to become, for example, bus drivers, so that we're training and upskilling people in New Zealand who do need help and who do need support, so that everyone can get the jobs that they want to be doing.
Yeah. Does it concern you when ministers like, because a lot of our bus drivers, health workers, etc., as I said, are going to Australia, the UK? How have you been advocating from an education / tertiary / job sector sort of avenue to challenge the ministers to say, hey, please stop the people from going over there? Because it's bus drivers as well, right?
Yeah, and we've been working with a lot of the people on the ground, such as the student unions, the Victoria University Wellington Student Association. Shout out to them. Have put forward a campaign called let me be accurate on this, like shit pay, no jobs, why stay? Like, and that basically hits the nail on the head, right? Like, and it's really important that we're working with people to actually keep the people we have here. But that's not something that just happens in isolation with just the tertiary sector. You need the whole levers of government to actually be investing in the public service again, because they've cut like thousands of jobs from the public service. And what that's done is, like, because of the jobs that rely on the public service, like a lot of private sector companies in Wellington have also gone under. I think there's a stat that I saw the other day that I think showed that 60,000 jobs in the Wellington region had disappeared. I mean, this is what the government is doing to the country. It's really awful. And it's not just about fixing the tertiary settings, although that's a big part of it. It's also aligning all of government to actually making sure that we build a country that's worth staying in and that's worth fighting for, and that young people want to feel excited about staying in, because it really sucks in New Zealand right now. We've got a racist, toxic government that's too busy sucking up to America, importing their culture wars. It's not just their culture wars that they're importing from America. They're literally importing the FBI here. They're literally importing the voter suppression tactics that they use in America. You've seen that with the changes to the proposed changes to the voting registration, which would have a huge impact on people. At least 100,000 people will be affected. I've seen some estimates of up to like 350,000. And like, call it what it is. It's like straight up voter suppression.
Yeah. So, so when as I said earlier, when the minister do say the comments like we're on par with New South Wales in the sector, we're on par money wise with Queensland or whatever. Does that anger you to know that they're just spreading more true misinformation? Well, not true misinformation, but misinformation.
Yeah. Well, it's truly misinformation. And it angers me on two levels, right? Because number one, the minister is representing what the nurses are actually striking about. It's not primarily about pay, it's about safe staffing levels. Because of the government's like hiring freeze for nurses, you're having to see like nurses cover more wards than they should, and you're seeing they're having to divide their attention between several patients in critical condition.
Yeah.
And that's not something that's safe for either the patients, that's not safe for the nurses, and that's not safe for the like whānau of the people that are in there. So that's the main reason they're striking. They want safe working conditions for the nurses and for the people at the hospitals. And the second is that even if you just take it on pay alone, what's wrong with actually paying nurses what they're worth? Like the minister has like misrepresented the information by taking the highest possible pay of like a nurse in New Zealand and comparing it to the average in Australia. That's like a really tricky thing to do. Like it just doesn't make sense.
Like, they're just not very good. Do you, taking it back to tertiary education, do you fear that because of all these issues, it'll stop people from like future nurses and future doctors and future bus drivers who are underpaid, or however many other sectors you want to choose, from wanting to study at these tertiary education places because they're being so underpaid?
Yeah, I think it'll have a chilling effect on people wanting to study at a tertiary level. But even more concerning, right, is if they do study here in New Zealand, and New Zealand does spend the money to educate people, I'm kind of worried that we're just educating people for Australia, right? Like we're spending all the money to train people here, and then they're going over to Australia. Like, and obviously that's a rational decision, but it's still like a net loss to the taxpayer. Instead of like trying to keep our best and brightest, we're literally training people for Australia instead of like making sure that there's a country here worth staying for.
Could one of the ways to fix that though be to bond people into roles?
Yeah, I think that's something that's worth exploring. I think bonding is like, it's one of the potential ways that we can implement like a policy of free TAFE, just to make sure that people are like kind of repaying what they're owed. But you could argue that New Zealand already has a soft form of bonding, because when you do go overseas, like the interest is like really expensive. So it's, I would argue that New Zealand already has a soft form of bonding in the interest loan scheme. But, obviously there's a lot of other ways we can explore to make that more attractive. And one of them is through paid placements as well, because they have paid placements over in Australia for people like who are doing placements as part of their learning.
Are you guys talking, just to clarify, are you guys talking about like that kind of thing where they have to stay in the job that they studied for so many years? Is that what we're saying here?
Yeah. Well, there's several ways you could do it, right? Like, I mean, you can't physically compel people to work somewhere they don't want to work, but one of the ways that you could do it is you could incentivize people. So for example, you could do it so that for every year you stay in New Zealand after you graduate, you get like 20% of your loan wiped out. And then that would mean that, after you've stayed there for 5 years, your whole like balance has been paid off. That's one of the ways you could do it. You could do like a hard bonding scenario where, for example, your student loan accrues interest unless you stay in New Zealand. So there's several ways you could do it.
Because I'm one of those people in the tertiary debate that think that universities should be included in our tertiary. But hey,
well, universities are a tertiary institution, but there's a very big difference between something like a polytec, which is much more hands-on, much more getting out involved that way, and much more theoretical through a university usually. Doctors are a little bit different, and talking about doctors and universities in Hamilton is not something I wanted to do this week.
I think one of the things that is causing some confusion is that there used to be a joint portfolio. So vocational education used to be part of the tertiary portfolio, but because this government, because basically the government split it at the start of this year, so they split off vocational education into its own thing and kept Simmons there, but they split off the universities and then put Ready there. So there's no longer a tertiary portfolio. Technically speaking, it's like two separate ones now, but they're still called tertiary education.
From your perspective, does that add or diminish the sector doing a move like that?
I think it's really helpful to consider the whole sector in context of each other. So I think that move to sort of divide the portfolio, they did for political reasons. Uncharitable people would argue that because they didn't have any confidence in what the minister was doing, so they wanted to give them a lighter workload. But I'm not one of those.
She is one of only two ministers that Luxon's actually ever demoted.
Well, I think it'd be 3 now, wouldn't it?
Didn't Andrew Bailey shoot himself in the foot on that one?
Yeah, I guess he technically resigned, but it's a jump before you're pushed situation. But you're right, he was technically not demoted.
Yeah. What a wonderful lot they are.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
But that just also goes to showcase the lack of standards, right? Because you've got ministers like Seymour getting away with ram raiding Parliament. You've got people like Peters saying quite anti-migrant stuff in the House, and much worse as well. And they've basically been able to get away with it. Like, if this was a normal functioning government and Luxon was an actual leader with any kind of spine or heart or any leadership skills, they would have gotten sacked. But because he's basically a puppet of his stronger coalition partners, nothing's going to happen to them. In the same with Costello, with her ties to the tobacco industry, they basically get away with stuff that would, in a functioning government, get you sacked.
Well, I just have one, and to be fair, this is a really big question for you. How do we fix the problems that are there now? Obviously, the government is sitting there going, well, there are clearly problems. That's why we are slashing and burning everything. And there were problems with the sector beforehand because there were Te Pukenga. For all of its attempts to do something big, there was still issues around debt, for example, that was being raised through Te Pukenga and being passed on. How do we fix our tertiary education sector?
That is a big question. But the biggest problem in this country is that fundamentally the tax system we have in this country is unbalanced. We don't have better capital gains or wealth tax, which would actually enable the sort of spending that would make tertiary education and other critical public services viable. We're trying to do things on the cheap here as a country rather than actually taxing the rich, actually taxing the 311 families in New Zealand who hold more wealth combined than the bottom 50%. And that's leading to a lot of perverse outcomes. That's leading to shit in our rivers. That's leading to our education system being crap. That's leading to our doctors being forced to do admin or cleaning work in the hospitals because we have a political establishment in this country that's addicted to giving their mates tax breaks and not letting them get taxed. So how you would fix the tertiary education sector is actually invest in it properly through a wealth tax.
Perfect.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to seeing this. Send me a link.
Yeah, link sounds good. I will do that after this episode, now that it's out and about. So yeah, that was Francisco Hernandez. Lovely guy to chat to. Wondering what your impression was of that.
I've got, just to clarify that, I've got contact with him now. So if you give me the link, I'll send it to him after we get up here.
Easy to do.
So yeah, that was fun to film last night. I really enjoyed hanging out with Francisco last night.
And see, I told you wouldn't be able to hear much of the fan. Because one of the things that comes up with parliamentary buildings is you can't change things like the fan or the wall colours or things like that. It's very specific the way they do things. And where Francisco was, and it might have been because of the type of microphone he was using, we had a low-level hum come through a few times. I managed to get rid of most of it.
That was good. That we could actually hear.
Yeah.
It would not fun filming it, guys.
I had worse. Definitely had worse. I want to answer a question that's come through in the chat that has popped up actually from Trippy Psych in relation to local elections, because nominations closed today, obviously. With local elections coming up, what could they possibly campaign on when this government has already caused such large damage with more toxic plans that they're bound to trickle in? It's a really good question. Actually, I've had a lot of candidates ask me something very similar, and I personally think that it's a great platform to push back on the government. You're an elected official representing your people, getting out there and actually pushing back on the government is something that's a bit more visible when you are in that position. And when you're dealing with a campaign, you can get out there and talk to the public, encourage the public to see what's going on, while you're still sitting there supporting your own communities and what you can do within your communities to make them better. Or you could campaign on a rates cap and sound like a complete fucking moron. I mean, both are good options.
Yeah. They're still out to differ with me, but we won't go there on this show.
Well, look, the way I look at it with rates caps, you can either completely disagree that they're going to work because they fuck over entire communities for generations to come, or you could be wrong. And you can choose to be wrong on this one, Blake. I don't mind.
Yeah. I mean, as I said before, I personally think, and this is like one of the only right kind of things I deal with, that they'll end up being good for some things. Not all, but good. So I would like to see at least some implementation of rates caps. But that can be a debate for another day.
No debate.
Yeah.
Not at all. There doesn't need to be. I'm right on this one. Simple as that.
But yeah, what going on in the news?
All sorts of things, actually. There's stuff I didn't get into the news that I wanted to, that I wasn't sure exactly how to make it funny because it was kind of horrific, like the electoral roll stuff that's been hitting the news the last few days. So this is a really good opportunity actually to remind people that if they haven't done so already, they need to check their electoral roll information. It's actually the poll that we're running this week as well, asking how many people have checked their electoral roll details are up to date. 95% of people who have voted so far have said yes, which is really good to see. So if you haven't, do it now. You actually need to make sure your details are up to date by midnight tonight to ensure that you get your postal ballot sent to you for this year's local body election. So if you haven't done it already, if you're that 5% that hasn't checked, do double check just in case. It's always a good idea to make sure this information's up to date. And if you're in the Tamaki Makaurau electorate for the by-election, you obviously want to make sure that that's up to date as well, because that's coming up fairly soon as well.
Sam had just saying, by the way, that Bishop's been moaning about half of Hutt City being unopposed.
Not moaning. Doesn't say moaning, just he's mentioning. And he's right, it is kind of sad that there isn't competition there, but it is what it is. Right, should we jump into some news?
I can't read. Yes.
It's all right. Let me, again, because I jumped offline before, I have to find it again. The news broadcast. That will be the model I want right there. This week's the news. Judith will still vote for disenfranchisement laws that she opposes as unconstitutional and wrong. Violent road cone attacks up 300% according to someone wanting to distract you from real issues. Sight seekers disappointed that tsunamis don't look like they do in the movies when they're about to destroy New York. And the FBI comes to town. The X-Files Aotearoa will be next. All that and more in this week's The News. Hello there, kia ora, and welcome to this week's The News. I'm Paul, and I want to believe. The Attorney General Judith Collins, KC, seen here setting her attack eyebrows to stun, put out a report on Monday which the government tried to stall, criticising the government plans to disenfranchise hundreds of thousands of voters, calling it unconstitutional, particularly because it would disproportionately impact Māori, Pacifica and disabled communities. In response, Justice Minister Paul Goldsmith, seen here in 1987 living the way he assumes Green MPs live today, said, "Look, we know the Electoral Commission met every deadline they said they would at the last election, even though they were severely under-resourced, and it was only the coalition who are unhappy with the length of time because we had to wait and see if we bent the knee to Winston or David, or both, and then spent over a month begging for an agreement. But it's important that we find an excuse to stop so many people from voting." 40,000 nurses have been striking all over the Mutu this week in response to a pay offer which they say doesn't reflect the level of work they actually undertake in a health system where hiring freezes and budget cuts are impacting every level of the sector. In response, Health Minister Simeon Brown, seen here trying to act totally normal by hiding in the corner of a dark empty room, tried to claim the highest pay rate for the most qualified nurse as somehow the average nurse's salary, so they should just shut up and be happy with what's on offer, in a move that experts are calling just straight up bullshitting to vilify nurses. Who the fuck does that, man? Minister of Transport Chris Bishop, seen here pointing at who he really blames for the government's low popularity ratings, has announced funding cuts for councils that use too many road cones, in a move being called a really stupid way to deal with the cost of living crisis that we were told the government was going to be laser focused on by the public. In response, the Ministry of Transport has said, well, if we kill more people with unsafe practices, that thins out potential markets, which drives down costs. It's a win-win for everyone. Well, except those who are dead. But, they're dead, so they can't complain. The country braced itself for tsunami activity this week after a massive 8.8 scale earthquake hit Russia. Being so far from the epicenter of the quake, the impacts felt here included increased swells, unseen and unexpected current changes, and everyone cursing at the same time as a 6:30 AM emergency alert was sent to confirm the tsunami was still happening in case anyone had fallen asleep forgetting about it. The government has this week repealed the ban on oil and gas exploration after a last-minute change which handed discretionary powers to 2 ministers, leaving opposition MPs just 23 hours to prepare for debate. The change mostly focuses on decommissioning oil fields and who gets landed with the bill to do so after what Mining Minister Shane Jones, seen here after his latest free dinner from a lobbyist for an industry that has weirdly had pro-them laws recently passed, said was, quote, "consultation in Māori ways. I interviewed myself." While exploration companies have said they're concerned about returning to the country because they consider a supportive one-term government a real issue, there's been no new oil or gas discoveries in 2 decades, the results of any new find wouldn't be evident for at least a decade from now, so in no way fix the current energy issues, Labour's Energy Minister Megan Woods has said those are all serious concerns and obvious issues, but we really need to be worried about the minister interviewing himself. I mean, we all remember the last time he did that and the charges on his credit card that happened with it. The coalition is making child labour great again with a new review process into the jobs that kids can do on farms, and what Labour is describing as a solution looking for a problem. Children on farms are often brought up undertaking light chores like collecting eggs or watering gardens, and Brooke Van Velden, seen here hearing that injury rates are climbing in the workplace, and an Auckland MP from a wealthy suburb nowhere near a farm, has decided that this needs to be formalised in a way that she's calling totally not a nanny state overreaching and telling parents how to parent issue. Federated Farmers has, however, welcomed the move, saying we don't want kids operating heavy machinery for the obvious risks that would pose. And Groundswell has said, we want kids working on farms all the time. So much so that they never go to school because that's when they get indoctrinated about the woke extreme left and learning things like how vaccines work and that climate change is real. Retailers are saying some will be facing bills of up to 80 grand a year in contactless payment fees under the proposed changes from the government that would outlaw the fees at point of sale but not stop banks from charging them. The Retail Association says this will require costs to be passed on to consumers with general price increases, which will impact everyone paying with cash, contact cards or contactless options, said Finance Minister Nicola Willis, seen here knowing she can afford a block of butter while you can't. We're clearly focused on that cost of living crisis and these fees are annoying, but the best way to fix this is to make it everyone's problem, not just a select few people's problem. Head of the FBI, Kesh Patel, seen here screwing up the salute his boss prefers, has opened an official attaché office in Wellington this week to ensure they have the ability to keep spying on our largest trading partner, tracking whatever it is that makes Don Jr.'s eyes glaze over the way they do, and know which online tools are being developed to help them and their allies stay in power through social media algorithm training. Said Patel, "It's not true we set up this because President Trump has only seen the first Lord of the Rings film and he wants the ring and is concerned about the threat of Sauron. We have some legitimate concerns as well. Frankly, though, I'm glad to be in a country where people in charge have no links to dodgy behaviour with minors. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to meet your Deputy Prime Minister." New numbers released this week that under a controversial police directive from earlier in the year reveal that over 5,000 shoplifting complaints have gone unanswered by police. Said Police Minister Mark Mitchell, seen here moments before his security contractor training kicked in and he realised being on a TVNZ interview with Jack Tane was a trap he'd just set off, "Don't worry, citizens arrest laws will fix it, and we know concerned New Zealanders will be jumping at the chance to tackle crime directly and put themselves in potential harm's way." Documents released on Thursday about the way pay equity changes were made by the coalition, which saw tens of thousands of mostly women stripped of any chance of fighting for fairer pay within their industries, show Workplace Relations Minister Brooke Van Velden, seen here daydreaming about Victorian child minds, pitched the idea as a way to ensure employers' rights to underpay were protected. Van Velden, quoted in the document, said, "Any limits on workers' human rights are justified to reduce risks to employers," before the process was rushed through. Working with Finance Minister Nicola Willis to ensure the retroactive dismissal of claims in progress at the time, Cabinet signed off on the measure in March with no formal regulatory review. Said Van Velden of the rush changes, "We accepted the risks of these changes in pursuit of a broader policy goal, like pulling up the ladder behind us and making sure the poor and working class know where they stand with us." Pseudo-law enthusiast Richard Savelle, seen here trying to bring back 90s boy band chic, was this week sentenced for repeated and violent online threats he made against former Prime Minister Dame Jacinda Ardern and charges of obstructing justice after absconding on bail and going on the run for 20 months. Savelle was sentenced to 11 months in prison with no special release conditions because the judge felt that Savelle would never meet them because he doesn't consider himself guilty of a crime. Said pseudo-law experts, "It's fascinating how someone like this views the world. If he hadn't made the threats, chances are he'd be running for council this year, probably in Hamilton or Central Otago." And finally, nominations have now closed for this year's local body elections, and while the last of nominations are still being finalised and will be released next week, we already know there are a few notable names. Former National Party MP and trendsetter in the world of creating political parties for fringe conspiracy believers, Jamie Lee Ross, is seeking a position on the Howick Local Board. Performer Suzanne Prentice is running for the Invercargill Licensing Trust, and comedian and actor Oscar Kitely is seeking re-election on the Henderson Massey Local Board. It should also be noted that Bernard Hickey in Hastings is not this guy. Bob Watson in Marlborough isn't the late Major League Baseball player. Chris Hadfield in Wanaka is not a former astronaut. Kevin Smith in Buller is not this filmmaker. Mark Watson in Tararua is not this British comedian. Bruce McLaren in Rangiora is not the legendary and long-dead race car driver. Mike King in Ahuriri is not the comedian and mental health advocate. Murray Wilson in National Park is not the father of the Beach Boys. Mark Patterson in Sefton is not the New Zealand First MP. That the only OJ running in Timaru is doing for the election and doesn't involve a white Ford Bronco. That Paul Williams in Rangiora is not a Grammy winner, although he may be a great singer. I honestly don't know. That Richard Wilson in Ashburton is not the late One Foot in the Grave actor known for playing Victor Meldrew. That Scott Adams in Marlborough is not the creator of Dilbert. That Simon O'Neill in National Park is not the controversial tenor who once claimed that Māori were barely post-Stone Age people. Tony Todd in Ashburton will not appear in your mirror if you say his name 3 times. And that Dunedin's Tony Bennett is not a legendary lounge singer and music writer. And that is this week's The News. Thanks again for watching and supporting. Live long, prosper, be one with the Force, and we'll catch you all next week. Yeah, there's a lot of people running. A ton of people.
And
so,
still...
already done the research on so many candidates. It's going to be a long election.
And still more of the final one to come out. I'm sure we'll have a full list up at some point.
Oh, it's going to do my head in. That's all right. I'll find a way to make it work. It's fine.
Just a bit of housekeeping before we go. we'll be doing our first on-site shoots this week.
No, it's not our first on-site shoot. I did an interview with Chloe and Ricardo not that long ago, and last year I interviewed
for me, sorry.
Okay,
Me.
I was gonna say, come on. I feel like all my hard work is for nothing when that happens, and people forget the work that I've done. It's fine.
Sorry for me. So yes. So that's we'll be down in the terraces of Wellington.
Yes.
So.
Right. I have two quick announcements to make before I wrap everything up for everyone, because I know it's coming up 10 to 9 and people want to jump over and watch BHN. We will be debuting our new opening countdown credits next week, which I've been working on for the last couple of days. It's different, very different, but hopefully just as dramatic and exciting. And I think from this week, we're going to start a competition on the Facebook page. Specifically seeing it's like a caption this competition. We'll give people one of the images and news stories that have cropped up this week, and people can come up with their own ending, and we'll incorporate that into the news. That'll be something that we run each week going forward. So we just need some, absolutely crazy, weird non sequiturs. Give us something a little bit more fun to play around with in the world of depressing bullshit that we have to deal with.
Yes. Until then, we'll see you next week.
Absolutely. Until next time, everybody. Ka kite. Have a fantastic week or weekend. Both. Do